everyone, at 1995 here in the video game fanfiction plot with a new story for you all. It is called Grey, and I do hope you enjoy this video, and remember, I do not own Transformers Prime series and Fullmetal Alchemist series or the story. I give full credit to its author MessyArtwok on DeviantArt. Now onto the story. Chapter 6, Oil and Water Simply Do Not Mix. Fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Oh Ratch. You've said that already. Like 6 times now, actually. Looking up from his intense focus on Alphonse, the Autobot medic simply huffed and returned his gaze to the young alchemist's empty mass. I'm simply trying to express my interest in something so profound. I mean, something like this should not be possible. All of our science, all of our knowledge of standard basic synontism combined with various laws of physics and carbon-based biology would suggest that something like this should not be possible. Yet, sitting in front of me are living examples of beings defying everything we thought we knew on the subject. Bulkhead simply stood there, arms crossed over his wide green chest, baffled. Ratchet just growled before waving a dismissive hand. I've got better things to do than stand here and try to explain to you the complexities of synontism and the laws of biology usually associated with it. Snickering softly, Edward leaned in next to Alphonse, his whispering accompanying a devious grin on his face. Does he even really understand it? Or do you suppose he's just... Just then a large metal digit whacked the young alchemist across the back of the head. My pistons may be rusty, but my hearing is as sharp as ever, you little twerp. Rubbing the back of his head, Ed's glare was sharp, meeting Ratchet's head on. What did you do that for, you old, grumpy trash heap? That really hurt. Ratchet's glare was dark and cold. And directed right at Edward and Edward alone, his words seething with every syllable. Call me an old, grumpy trash heap one more time and I'll show you what pain really is. Waving his hands frantically, Al seemed almost hysterical, babbling more than actually talking. Hey now. Come on. Let's not do anything rash that the one of us may seriously regret later. With a very seriously mashed demeanor, Bulkhead tried to put himself between Ratchet and the young golden-haired human. Come on Ratch, he's just a kid. Cut him a break. Ratchet huffed, looking at Bulkhead with a frustrated, exasperated look, but slowly nodded in agreement. Bulkhead was right. And his behavior at the moment was inexcusable. Just because this human was trying his patience, that was no excuse to. Just then, Ratchet and Edward's gaze met. Ed just sat there cross-legged on the catwalk, hunched over slightly, glaring. Ratchet returned his own sinister gaze. Growling, Ed used a single pointer finger to pull his bottom right eyelid down whilst sticking his tongue out with an audible mm. Growling loudly, Ratchet threw his hands up in exasperation. That's it. Ratchet's hands suddenly retracted back into his forearm panels, and transformed into 2 pristine silver blades. The look in his optics was both sinister and disturbing. I'm through with my examinations. Perhaps now I can move on to dissection. All the color from Edward's face seemed to flush away when he realized just what the Autobot medic meant when he said dissection. As Ratchet slowly moved closer, his blades spread apart to each side, he grinned menacingly. What do you say we open you up and see just what makes your what do you call it automatic? Before Ratchet could say anything else after he said tick, Edward bolted from his spot on the catwalk and sprinted as though his life sincerely depended on it. Ratchet growled before perusing him into an all-out chase. Get back here, you little, I'm not through with you yet. In the midst of running, Ed suddenly stopped and bellowed. Who are you calling little? Ed then suddenly remembered why he was running and took off again before the old medic could catch up. Ratchet snorted a laugh and slid to a stop. You heard me, human. Ed was cross. If there was one thing he hated above all others, it was remarks made regarding his size. It was at this moment Bulkhead realized that if he didn't do something quick, they were going to have another war erupt right here in the main terminal of their base. It had been somewhat amusing up to this point. But now things were getting just a little bit ridiculous. Ratchet? Where's Smokescreen and RC? In an instant, Ratchet's demeanor seemed to do an entire 180. Looking at Bulkhead, with an almost puzzled look, Ratchet huffed. They are with Optimus sifting through the wreckage left behind in the Decepticons' most recently discovered Energon mine. If I'm not mistaken, they're looking for any indication from the space bridge to speculate just why exactly it strayed from its original function of interstellar space travel to interdimensional travel. They should be returning sometime soon with scans and previous data entries for me to analyze. Ratchet paused for a moment, thinking something over before looking back at Bulkhead. Speaking of which, aren't you supposed to be with Optimus examining the wreckage left behind? Bulkhead shrugged casually. Seemed to me like the boss had more than enough help with RC and the kid tagging along with him, and with Bumblebee out on patrol, I figured I should stay behind to go pick up Jack, Maiko and Raphael from school. Having long since returned to sitting beside Al, both brothers simultaneously cocked their heads to the side and asked, "Who are Jack, Maiko and Raphael?" Grabbing a large piece of retrofitted paneling intended for cavern stability and chucking it over his head out of the way, Smokescreen groaned. "How much longer do we have to dig through this garbage before we can go back to the base?" With a handheld scanner resting comfortably in her palm, RC chuckled. "What's the matter, Smokescreen? I thought you welcome any opportunity to go out into the field?" With a poutful nod, the sleek, sporty bot shrugged. "Well, yeah, I do. I mean, I know it's a big part of Team Prime to go out and gather intel and everything, but..." RC laughed. "But?" As he shoved to the side another piece of metal paneling, Smokescreen swayed his body back to face RC. "I just don't understand what it is we hope to find by digging through all this rubble. I mean, can't we learn more about what happened by talking to those two humans back at base?" As she walked across the debris, moving the scanner back and forth, RC sighed. Watching the ground rather than meeting Smokescreen's gaze. "Those two have already told us all we need to know about their situation. Besides, you know as well as I do that by finding the space bridge's main terminal and downloading all previous information stored within it will give us the best idea of what may or may not have happened, causing those boys to get stranded here in the first place." Kneeling down, RC pushed some debris to the side, continuing to scan the wreckage. She then paused, looking to Smokescreen with a small serious smile on her faceplates. "But I can't help but feel like when you say learn more you're not referring to their interdimensional jump, are you?" Smokescreen shrugged casually as he folded his arms across his chest, pausing completely from his task. "Well, doesn't it bother you at all that those two humans have a supposed horrific past that caused one to lose both an arm and leg and the other to lose his entire body? Not to mention that both of them have almost supernatural abilities that no human in this reality has? I mean, I don't know about you, but I'm rather curious. I'd like to know just what was so horrible that it caused so much carnage." Smokescreen. Jumping suddenly, Smokescreen turned slowly, met by the fortifying gaze of his commander. Slowly moving past the much younger bot, whose gaze followed him closely, Optimus kneeled next to RC. "Have you found anything suggesting a location of the Decepticon space bridge?" "No. Not yet. But it has to be around here somewhere." Nodding, Optimus slowly stood and let his gaze travel along what remained of the suspended catwalks placed along the main cavern's wall. Smokescreen. Again, the young hot rod jumped to attention. Optimus turned to meet his gaze. "I understand that you are curious about the Elric brothers' past. To speak truthfully, I'd speculate that we all reserve an above-average amount of curiosity." Looking down, Smokescreen was slow to nod. Optimus' heavy footsteps moved closer as the young bot stared at the rubble. However, looking up, Smokescreen was met by Optimus placing a gentle servo on his shoulder. "Out of respect for their privacy, it is our obligation not to confront the subject unless they themselves bring the subject into question. We each have a past history that we ourselves may or may not necessarily want to share. Those two, at present, obviously have a past that they find hard to discuss. Not surprising, considering in all truth, we are complete strangers to them. I'm confident that barrier will eventually change, but until then, I think it's best that we just focus on finding a way to return them to the place they truly belong. Looking at RC, who watched the two of them, intently, Optimus paused, and then turned his attention back to Smokescreen. Besides, imagine, if you will, that the roles were reversed. Would you not want an ally beside you if you were in a strange new world, with strange new beings? Smokescreen laughed, looking at Optimus with a cheeky grin. I don't have to imagine that, sir. Pausing, Smokescreen looked away, his smile gone. I know exactly what that feels like. We all do. RC said, slowly standing from her spot in the debris. We all experienced that when we first came to Earth. Letting his gaze gently pass from Smokescreen and RC before resting his attention on a Vehicon's arm protruding from the rubble, Optimus spoke softly. I think we Autobots better understand just what exactly those two humans are experiencing. Perhaps we are not experiencing reality to the same degree. But, even though there are obvious differences with our circumstances, there are also obvious similarities. And as sentient beings facing similar hardships, it is our obligation to help them in any way we can. Even if one way of providing assistance is to be silent when it comes to difficult subjects of one's past history. There was a long moment of silence where neither RC nor Smokescreen said a single word. The entire cavern seemed to fall silent. It was during this silence that Optimus sincerely hoped that the point he wanted to make was making complete sense in their processors. Regardless whether that happened to be the case or not, Optimus rolled his shoulders and broadened his chest before activating his facial shield. Now, we should continue with our search. I'm all too certain that Ratchet is probably growing impatient for the data he has asked for. Grabbing a large section of catwalk, and throwing to the side, Optimus revealed a section of tunneling that at first indication seemed visually unaffected by the explosion. Peering into the tunnel from behind Optimus, Smokescreen huffed and scowled. Why couldn't we have moved the piece in the first place? So let me see if I understand this correctly. We are not the only humans here in this reality? No. Do these humans have the ability to use alchemy? No. What about alchemy? What in the name of cybergen is that? It's a hypothetical universal solvent, having the power to dissolve every other substance, including gold. It's mostly used by the people of Shing for its medicinal qualities. It's like alchemy. But at the same time. It isn't. No. Sitting side by side on the catwalk with their arms folded neatly under their chins, resting on the bars, both Edward and Alphonse watched Ratchet as he gazed into an Autobot-sized microscope. Alphonse seemed genuinely fascinated with watching Ratchet work. Edward on the other hand just looked bored. Looking up at the two, Ratchet sighed. Don't the two of you have anything better to do? Stretching his arms, Ed was in mignon as he started talking. Well, Al, what do you say we go outside and see what this world is like? Oh. Wait. I forgot. Someone said we can't. Not even moving his head from its position by his microscope, Ratchet looked up, glaring. Do not start with me, human. I still haven't completely cast out the idea of dissecting you. Looking at Ratchet hysterically, Al stuttered, just wanting to think of something to say to keep the medic from wanting to kill Ed. Ratchet? If I may ask? Why exactly can't we leave your base? I can only assume you all must have a pretty important reason. I'm just curious as to what that reason is. Does it have anything to do with those Decepticon guys? Slowly averting a cold gaze directed at Edward, Ratchet's optics fell on Alphonse. His gaze far more gentle. Yes. Moving from his stance at his workbench, to the main computer terminal, Ratchet brought up a map of the world. It was covered by several red markers present in various places across the continent. Looking at the two boys who had walked over from their previous spot, Ratchet motioned to the screen. Each one of these red markers indicates activity from the Decepticons. The more vibrant the marker, the more recent of the activity. Our satellite images indicate that ever since your rescue, Decepticon activity has increased across the continent almost tenfold. We predict that Megatron is looking for something. Just then, Ratchet averted his gaze from the screen to the Elric brothers. That's something we have speculated as being the two of you. Why us? What did we do? Come on, Al, think about it. Looking at Ed, Al couldn't help but feel perplexed. But then it dawned on him, making him feel kind of stupid just because it was so obvious. Our alchemy. Nodding, Edward folded his arms tight against his chest. It's like the old bot said. Here in this reality, our form of alchemy is virtually unknown. And it probably wasn't the smartest move in showing that Starscream guy just what we were capable of. Al snapped his attention to Ed. So what are you saying? He's saying that the Decepticons probably think your alchemy can be harnessed and used as a weapon. Looking at Ed with a nonchalant glance, Ratchet then scowled and looked down, holding his chin in deep thought. Megatron is not that hard to predict. He's a tyrant. If he sees or hears of something that he thinks will give him even the slightest advantage in our war, he would not hesitate in trying to acquire it. By any means necessary. Ratchet then shot up his glance and growled. And don't call me old bot. If you wish to address me, call me by my name or by my title. Moving on, Ratchet closed the map and slowly made his way back over to his workbench. If you two leave the confines of the space, there is no way we can guarantee your safety. Who says we need you all to protect us? Bolting upright with a clenched fist, Ed growled, loudly. We never asked you Autobots to save us. We never asked you to bring us to your base. And we never asked you to risk your lives for ours. We've been through far worse than that small skirmish between you machines. Your kind may be far bigger, stronger and more advanced than us, but we've always found a way through one dangerous situation after another. We would have been just fine on our own. Grabbing his red coat, pulling it over his back, Ed glared, his voice still seething. We're not helpless. And we most certainly are not weak. We've done just fine on our own up to now. And will continue to do so as long as we draw Bree. Just then, Edward was sent flying across the catwalk into an opposing rail. Al stood steady holding his fist firm. Rubbing a sore cheek, Edward bellowed. Al? What the hell did you do that for? I did it to remind you, brother. Ed's furrowed brows suddenly relaxed, and his gaze changed from furious to curious. Al laughed looking at his brother. Ed. We're not invincible. And we most certainly are not immortal. Don't you remember what Optimus said? They aren't helping us because they have to. They're helping us because they want to. They know that we're not weak, brother. And they know that we're capable of taking care of ourselves. Our performance in the cave is all the proof that they need. However, brother. Clenching his fist again, Al cried out. Brother, for once just let go of your vanity and let someone help you. Ed said nothing. Looking away, he just sat there rubbing his cheek, almost pouting as he mulled over everything Al had just said. Shortly thereafter, Ed smiled softly. Then a grin beamed across his face before laughing. I guess I can be a little too proud for my own good sometimes, huh? You'd swear that I was more like that dumbass, Mustang. With a sigh of relief, Al just chuckled. He then slowly ventured over to lend Ed a hand. Too bad Mustang's ego can't be solved with a good beating. Just then, Ed grabbed Al and flipped him over, slamming him against the catwalk grate. Looking up, Al was still coming to terms with what just happened. Looming over him with an even cheekier grin than before, Ed beamed. Not saying a word. Then again, between the Elric brother '*s. No words were ever really needed. Turning his attention to Ratchet, Ed sighed. Sorry about the hostility, old fella. I guess I. Dodging an enormous metal hand from smacking him head on, Ed shot back upright and growled. Hey. I was trying to apologize, you grumpy, old, rusted, bucket of bolts. How many times do I have to tell you the same thing, you small, scrawny, little screeplet? Don't call me old. Watching the two go at it once more, letting their bantering fade from his mind, Alphonse shook his head, sighing in defeat. Those two were quite literally like oil and water. They simple just do not mix. Ratchet, can you hear me? Bringing his attention back into focus, Al's attention was drawn to the main computer terminal. Looking up from having Ed pinned in a corner, threatening him with a blade while the little human threatened to use alchemy to transform the Autobot into a giant toaster oven, permanently, Ratchet stood and then made his way to the screen. "I'm here, Optimus. Activate the ground bridge to the arrival coordinates. We are ready to be bridged back." Without saying another word, Ratchet moved to the base's ground bridge control panel, pulling the terminal's main control lever only after ensuring that the coordinates were correct. In a brilliant flash of swirling blues and greens, the ground bridge came to life. Watching this, the two Elric brothers were in awe. To think that something like that, but on a much larger, more out-of-control scale, was the very thing that brought them to this world to begin with. If only going back to Amestris could be as easy as entering a destination and pulling a switch. But they've already been told that their circumstance of travel was far more complicated. One by one, Optimus, RC and Smokescreen came through the ground bridge before Ratchet shut it down. Transforming, Optimus looked to Ratchet, his naturally booming voice commanding everyone's attention, including that of the Elric brothers. "Ratchet, what is the current situation regarding all active Decepticon forces?" Standing by the main computers, Ratchet brought up the very same map that was viewed by the brothers only minutes ago. Most of Megatron's forces seem to be localized in non-conclusive locations across the continent and are slowly dissipating. They are searching for Edward and Alphonse. "That's the assumption," Ratchet said softly, looking up to see the Autobot commander's optics studying the computer screen. "Optimus? What is it?" Furrowing his gaze for but a moment, Optimus shook his head. "It is nothing to be overly concerned about. Our top priority at the moment is finding a way to replicate the conditions that took place, allowing both Edward and Alphonse to be brought here to this reality. That way, we can reverse the effects and send them home." Handing Ratchet the scanner that RC had previously possessed, as well as a black device of sizable scale when compared to his own hand, Optimus spoke. "The scanners you equipped us with, as well as the Space Bridge's main conduit event data recorder, I hope, will provide you with the data you need to make sense of the anomalies that are presently blocking us from returning our new friends from going home." Looking at everything, Ratchet's attention was transfixed and not interested in anyone or anything else. "I'll begin a thorough examination of the data starting immediately. Besides, the sooner we can send that short, yellow-haired scribblet home, the better. Truthfully, I don't think he's in as much danger as you think, Optimus. He's barely visible. I would think it would be hard for Megatron's forces to target him. Who are you calling a scribblet, you oversized garbage disposal? And just what the hell is a scribblet anyway?" Holding Edward up off the catwalk to keep him from lunging at an obviously enraged Ratchet being kept at bay by Optimus' mere presence, Al just sighed softly. "Let me go, Al. Let me go. It's time, once and for all, for this old geezer to learn that he can't just call me a pipsqueak midget and get away with it. Human, if you don't cease and desist from calling me old, I will personally turn you into a hood ornament. Or worse, I'll just let Megatron have you." Hey, is there anyone at base presently not shouting?" Approaching the main computer, RC chuckled. "What do you need, bulkhead?" "Well, if someone could activate a ground bridge to my current location, I'd very much appreciate it." Without saying much of anything, Ratchet turned away and did just that. As before, the ground bridge suddenly roared to life with all of its swirling green and blue glory. In moments, a large green utility vehicle roared through the vortex and came to a screeching halt. 3 of the 4 doors equipped on Bulkhead's vehicle form flung open, and out of the front passenger seat sprung a vibrantly dressed young girl. Short shorts, boots, a pink and purple shirt with a green graphic on it, a bright yellow belt with a stuffed animal attached, black and pink hair and hazel-colored eyes. Holy cow, Bulk! You had to be pulling at least 10 Gs on that last turn. That was totally awesome, Only moments later, 2 boys came around Bulkhead as he transformed, looking at the girl staring up at the large green mech. One boy was significantly taller than the other, dressed casually in a dark shade of brown, beige-colored shirt with a very light gray long-sleeved shirt underneath. His extremities were covered by a mildly faded pair of blue jeans and black and white tennis shoes. His black hair draped loosely over his dark blue eyes and fair complexion. The other boy, obviously smaller in stature, wore an orange vest with a cream-colored shirt tucked neatly underneath. His large, dark, hazel-colored eyes covered by large, red, square-shaped glasses. His dark hazel-colored hair combed back in a neat, yet messy style. A style that was obviously somewhat in sync with his style of baggy, dark blue jeans and large-tongued tennis shoes. All of these details and others, Edward and Alphonse tried to take in. So were these the other humans the Autobots spoke of before? Turning her attention away from Jack, Raph and their discussion, Maiko's attention suddenly fell on two figures standing far above them on the catwalk. Hey? Who are the new guys? Maiko couldn't help but find herself at a bit of a loss for words. She'd never seen someone with golden hair and golden eyes before. All three of the Team Prime humans were at a loss. Bulkhead chuckled half-heartedly, attempting to try to explain when he was suddenly cut off by the golden-haired boys laughing. Looking down at the trio, a fierce look came into his eyes and a wide smile spread on his face. He then motioned to the armored behemoth beside him. "This is my brother, Alphonse Elric." He then motioned to himself with his thumb. "I'm his older brother, Edward." His grin became wider and more determined than ever. Even though these kids probably wouldn't understand what he was going to say, there was still a perceived sense of pride in saying it. "I'm the Fullmetal Alchemist." High in the stratosphere of the planet, the Decepticon warship idled in orbit. Standing on the bridge, Megatron's large frame loomed its ominous shadow over everything in front of it. Entering the bridge, the smaller, more slender frame of Soundwave came up quietly, barely making a sound as he walked. Soundwave. The smaller mech simply looked to Megatron. It's only a matter of time before the Decepticon cause takes what it is rightfully owed. And Optimus Prime and the rest of those accursed Autobots. Will be reduced to nothing more. But a pile of smoldering ash. His gaze drifted beyond the main screens of his warship's terminals. His chuckle was low and ominous. "Is everything in order?" Soundwave simply nodded. "Excellent." Slowly turning to meet the smaller mech's gaze, Megatron's grin was toothy, menacing and cold. "After all, I cannot be the only Decepticon aboard this warship growing rather impatient to meet these fascinating humans." Well, that's the ending of that chapter. I do hope you enjoy this video. If you like to see more, remember to hit that like button, subscribe to this channel and leave a comment down below. Until next time.